Okay, so we are now on communication strategies. So we are done with the first 10 topics of chapter 7. Now we move on to chapter 8. So we have here the first topic, which is identifying clues and inferring meaning from spoken and written text. So for this lesson, we have at least two objectives. We have identify meanings of unfamiliar words through context clues and infer meaning from oral and written text. So it says here, communication strategies are used to convey the meaning of the message or figure out the words the speakers or writers are trying to impart. So, tinatawag daw natin na communication strategies yung mga technique na ginagamit natin in order for us na mapadali yung pag, um, pag-convey natin ng gusto nating sabihin, and also the techniques na ginagamit natin in order for us to easily understand yung mga naririnig natin. So, sabi niya dito, these are also used by learners to overcome problems in understanding messages and at the same time in relaying their messages to their audience. So, this one is not only used by professionals. So, even tong mga communication strategies na ito ay ginagamit din ng students in order for them to learn effectively. Say for example, meron silang ginagamit na technique or strategy in order for them na mas madali nilang maintindihan yung lesson na dinidiscuss ng kanilang teacher. Now, communication strategy ay pwedeng verbal. It could also be non-verbal or visual. So, when we are talking of verbal communication, it could either be written and oral. While non-verbal, of course, you know that already, yung mga body language, yung mga gestures natin, mannerisms, sign languages, those are considered forms of non-verbal communication. So, itong communication strategies na to, the first two common strategies that are being used are, ito nga yung i-discuss natin. The first one is identifying clues and inferring meaning. So, identifying clues or context clues helps readers to understand meanings of unfamiliar words. Of course, when we say identifying clues, it's like trying to look out for words that could lead you to a better understanding of a certain information. Hahanap ka ng hint doon sa isang statement, doon sa spoken statement or written statement na magtuturo sa'yo ng understanding or ng meaning ng nabasa mo or narinig mo. So sabi niya dito, inference skills are necessary foundations of higher order thinking skills. So before you could develop yung mga higher order thinking skills like synthesizing, evaluation, analyzing, application, yung mga yon, you have to learn first kung paano tong sinasabi nating inferring meaning or inference. So what are context clues? So when we say context clues, these are hints that an author gives to help define a difficult or unusual word within a book. So from the word clue, from the word hint, siya yung word or keyword or statement or phrase na makakapagpadali para sa'yo na maunawaan yung difficult or unusual word. So the clue may appear within the same sentence as the word to which it refers, or it may follow in the next sentence. Say for example, isang sentence lang yan. Of course, yung context clue ay nakapaloob within the sentence siya. But if you are actually having a paragraph, usually the clues can be found on the next sentence. So these are hints in the passage, paragraph, and sentence that can tell you the meaning of a word that you are not familiar with. So, with the use of context clues, even if first time mong marinig yung isang word, even if it's your first time na ma-encounter yung isang concept, maiintindihan mo siya through the use of context clues. Now, there are different types of context clues. We have the definition clue, synonym clue, contrast clue, example clue, experience clue, adjacent clue. So let us discuss them one by one. When we say definition clue, it's a word or phrase that defines the unfamiliar word by introducing the definition with these phrases. Is defined as means, refers to, or simply pag may nabasa kayo na word na is or means, yung mga yun, even without the word as, that is already considered a definition clue. Example, genetics is defined as the scientific study of heredity. So, hindi po natin alam kung anong kahulugan ng genetics. For layman's or for normal persons, hindi po natin alam ang ibig sabihin ng genetics. Now, with this sentence, alam mo na kung ano ang genetics because you already have what we call definition clue. That is, genetics is defined as the scientific study of heredity. So, yung definition clue mo is introduced by the term is defined. So, you already know that genetics is a scientific study of heredity. Next, synonym or synonym clue is a word or phrase that has similar meaning to the unfamiliar word, usually introduced by phrases like in other words, or that is to say, or so example is the facade, or in other words, the face of campus reflects the totality of the university. Ulitin ko, the facade, or in other words. You have there the term in other words. So ibig sabihin, the words that follow, yung the face of the campus, yun ang ibig sabihin ng word na facade. Because it says there the facade, or in other words, or pwede ring in other term, or in simple term, parang ganon, the face of the campus. So, yun ang ibig sabihin ng facade. You already know the meaning of the word facade because of what we call synonym clue. Anong pagkakaiba ng definition clue and synonym clue? When we say synonym clue, it's a word or phrase that has similar meaning. As in similar meaning. When we say definition clue naman, the unfamiliar word is being defined. Contrast clue. What is this contrast clue? It's a word or phrase that has the opposite meaning of the unfamiliar word or the antonym, which are introduced by however, but, instead of, on the other hand, on the contrary, in contrast, unlike, although, and even though. Example here is, bats are nocturnal animals that hunt for food during nighttime, while birds are active during daytime. So, we do not know what is nocturnal animals or what are nocturnal animals. So, we are not familiar with that. But with the contrast clue na nilagay niya dyan, nocturnal animals that hunt for food during nighttime, while birds. So, there is the word while. And with that, makikita mo yung contrasting ideas that nocturnal animals are animals that hunt food during the night, while birds are active during daytime. So, we call those animals that are inactive during daytime as nocturnal animals. Kahit hindi ka science teacher or kahit hindi ka under scientific field, if you read the contrast clue while, and then nandun yung mga statements, of course, malalaman mo na kaagad kung ano ang meaning ng nocturnal animals. Now, we move on to example clue. What is example clue? Word or phrase that provides an example to illustrate the unfamiliar word introduced by phrases like such as, for example, for instance, to illustrate, and like. So, andito yung example natin. Do good things even when nobody sees you, like being honest at all times. So, parang in this statement, you are not it is not specified kung ano yung doing good things even nobody sees you. So, parang if you're not familiar with the meaning of this one, magigets mo pa rin because nag-cite siya ng example. It says there, like being honest at all times. So, alam mo na ngayon that doing good things even when nobody sees you An example of that is being honest at all times. So you already know what that statement, doing good things even when nobody sees you, is pointing out. Alam mo na kung ano yung kanyang pinopoint out. Next is experience clue. Ano naman tong experience clue na to? Draws upon personal experience for background knowledge to help you infer the meaning of the unfamiliar word, which is introduced by a phrase like familiar experience or information you already know. So example here is, people with tantrums are hard to handle because they have low emotional intelligence. People with tantrums are hard to handle because they have low emotional intelligence. So, what do we mean when we say low emotional intelligence? So, parang we don't know that one, even that term, people with tantrums. But with the experience that we already know is yung hard to handle, of course, alam nating lahat kung anong ibig sabihin ng hard to handle. Now, we are already aware of people with tantrums are hard to handle because they have low emotional intelligence. So, naiintindihan na natin kaagad because of the phrase, they are hard to handle. It's actually an experience, a general experience. So when we say general experience, maraming tao ang nakakaalam. Many people are knowledgeable about it. And the last clue is the adjacent clue. When we say adjacent clue, these are words or phrases in a nearby sentence that explains the meaning of the unfamiliar word. Say for example, the world suffers because of pandemic. This disease outbreak gives negative effects to all the countries and all sectors of the economy. So we have two sentences here, and the unfamiliar word here, of course, we have pandemic. So, nung hindi pa naman nagka-pandemic, we are not aware kung anong ibig sabihin ng pandemic. Pero there is an adjacent sentence. So, when we say adjacent, it's katabi ang ibig sabihin. So, this disease outbreak gives negative effects to all the countries and all sectors of the economy. So, we are now aware na ang ibig sabihin ng pandemic is a disease that gives negative effects to all the countries and sectors of the economy. Kasi yung adjacent sentence or the next sentence explains already the meaning of the unfamiliar word. So sometimes, wag nating sabihin na, hindi ko naintindihan tong first sentence na to, hindi ko naintindihan tong statement na to. Sometimes you just have to give it a time to read all those sentences because sometimes yung mga clue are adjacent to it or nasa tabi lang nito. So those are the different types of clues. So wag nating sabihin na ang hirap namang intindihin ng sentence na to because always, especially an experienced author or a professional writer, naglalagay siya ng clue sa kanyang mga sinusulat. So even if we are not familiar with the word, even if it's our first time hearing the word, mag-base tayo doon sa context. Mag-base tayo doon sa mga definition clue, synonym clue, contrast clue, example clue, experience clue, adjacent clue. Kung paano siya nagamit doon sa sentence, yun ang magtuturo sa atin para malaman natin kung ano yung meaning na yun. Next, how to use context clues. Context is the background, environment, setting, framework, or surroundings. So, ulitin ko, ang ibig sabihin po ng context is the background, the environment, the setting, the framework, the surrounding. And another word na we can associate with context is the word situation. Ano nga ba yung situation doon sa sentence na yun? So, you're going to identify all those. Ano nga ba yung environment, yung background, yung framework, yung surroundings, in order for us to understand the meaning of that certain unfamiliar word. So, here are some steps in using context clues. The first one is circle the word or phrase that you don't understand, then look into the context. And then, underline key phrases. So, circle the word and then you circle the word that you don't understand or that you are not familiar with, and after which, i-underline nyo yung mga alam ninyo na phrases and ideas in the sentence that are you can use as keywords. And then next is give the main idea of the paragraph. the new word is in, and then say the sentence in your words and guess what the new word means. Next, what is inferring meaning? So, inferring is figuring out an idea that was partially expounded in a text or an oral message. Inferring is somewhat similar to predicting. Yung hindi mo pa nakikita yung kabuuan ng text but you already have an idea sa mind mo kung what is this text all about. Say for example, let's try to put it in a situation. Say for example, hindi pa umuulan pero you can see that there are clouds on the sky, and then you generalize or you concluded that at 3 p.m. it's gonna rain o mauulan or babagyo. That is what we call, or that is considered making an inference, or that is inferring already. You cannot see the whole but you already have an idea in your mind kung ano ang mangyayari. So that is also inferring in terms of written discourse. So in other words, a conclusion is formed by reasoning based from evidences. So when you are inferring or when you are giving an inference, making an inference, make sure that there is what we call an evidence. So this inference is sometimes called hypothesis. Or what is hypothesis? It's an educated guess. So when we say educated guess, it's based on evidence. It means that whatever you say, whatever is implied, whatever is inferred, it could be proven by an evidence, or there is a hint, or there is an idea that brought you into that conclusion. Next, what are the ways of inferring meaning? So how can we infer meaning? How can we predict meaning from a text? So hints or clues from text, visuals, messages, and readers' background knowledge are used to make assumptions and conclusions. In addition to context clues, using prior knowledge about the issue and situation can help dig out meanings. So, when you see a person, parang through his actions, through his words, the tone of his voice, parang mai-infer mo kaagad kung what is inside that person. That is also inferring. You base on the actions or attitude being shown by that person at siguro ganito yung situation niya, ganito yung kanyang emotional situation, ganito yung kanyang nararamdaman, ganito yung kanyang experience. So, you can make an idea or nakakapaglabas ka ng isang conclusion or generalization out of those things that you can or that you have observed. So, ganun din po yung inferring meaning. Ganun at ganun yung sinasabi nating inferring meaning. You come out of an idea that is based on evidence. So, inferring meaning from written and oral text. So, inference in reading and listening is the ability to understand the meaning of passage of a text without all the information being identified. So, you cannot see the whole but you already have the idea of what the whole is all about. So, we have here the close technique. When we say close technique, this is based on the psychological theory of closure, which supports the idea that a person attempts to complete any pattern that is not complete. Say for example, nakakita ka ng picture ng car na wala yung isang wheel niya. Of course, alam mo kaagad na what is missing there is the wheel of the car. Alam mo kaagad na ang nawawala dun ay yung kanyang gulong. So, closed test theory activities can help to infer meaning behind text by recognizing and completing patterns within the reading material. So, yun yung tinatawag natin na closed technique. Parang, even if you don't know what word is ang ilalagay doon, or parang hindi complete yung sentence, hindi complete yung paragraph, alam mo kaagad kung ano yung word or accurate word na i-fit mo doon. That is what we call closed technique. Tayo kasing mga tao, we tend to complete every pattern. We tend to fill the gaps. Say, for example, kulang, parang we tend to normally fill in that blank. Next, we have the general sense. This concept is a way of inferring the meanings of words or passages based on context clues. Activities on general sense help readers understand implied word meanings even with unfamiliar words like in many vocabulary enhancement activities. So when we say general sense, it's always happening. Laging ganon yung nangyayari, laging ganon yung statement, laging ganon yung sentence, laging ganon yung nangyayari doon sa kwento. That's why you tend to give an idea na alam mo because it's always or the situation is always the same. Yun yung tinatawag natin na general sense. Kahit hindi mo alam kung anong word ang dapat na nandoon, kung alam mo na always naman na yun yung nangyayari, parang it's very basic. It's already a habitual experience. So, alam mo na kaagad kung anong ilalagay mo doon. Next is examples. The use of examples that mean the same as the word a reader is trying to understand is one way of inferring meaning. In here, the readers use their background knowledge to find out what they do not know. Sabi ko nga kanina, yung doing good even when nobody sees you, and then you give some examples. Parang you know already what are those things. Say for example, yung teacher, magbigay lang ako ng simple examples. Say for example, triangles, oblongs, rectangles, and squares. Of course, you already know that the general idea is shape. Kasi I already provided examples. Halimbawa naman, I give examples such as, anong tawag dito? Green, pink. Of course, you already know that the general idea is colors. Next, opposite and contrast. Giving opposites and contrasts help the readers take information they already know to infer meaning to other words. Say for example, yung sinasabi natin kanina na nocturnal animals, nagbigay ka na ang nocturnal animals ay they hunt for food during night time, or ang ibig sabihin ng nocturnal animals ay they are awake during the night and then sleep during daytime. So parang ganun, nandun yung two contrasting ideas. That's why you can infer that the meaning of nocturnal animals are animals that are awake during nighttime and they are sleeping during daytime, because there are two contrasting ideas that are presented. Next is inferring intended meaning from literature. Of course, the first thing is spend time reading the author's biography and his or her other works. So, kapag babasahin mo kasi yung background ng author or nung writer, of course, from the background alone, malalaman mo na kung ano kanyang style, ano yung kanyang mga experiences, saan niya na-finish yung kanyang education, saan niya na-master yung kanyang skills, yung kanyang mga talents. And then, from those information, yun yung magtuturo sa'yo na, this is the meaning of this literary piece. Ito yung kanyang forte, ito yung kanyang field, ito yung kanyang specialization. That's why ang kanyang sinulat ay ganito. So, ito yung kanyang experience, kaya ganito yung title ng kanyang literature. So, kung ano yung background ng author na yun, it could also be an evidence and it could also be a clue para maintindihan mo yung kanyang sinasabi. Next is, we have what we call, look at the historical and cultural context of the literary piece. Anong era, anong period ba nasulat yung literary piece na yun? During the Renaissance period ba? During the medieval period ba? Of course, during the war ba? Para ang kanyang content is all about hatred, it's all about blood, it's all about combat, warship. So, yung historical and cultural context of the literary piece will also help you understand kung tungkol saan yung literature na binabasa mo. Next is, read the piece of writing, and while reading, ask questions about the story, make guesses and predictions. So, one way for you to easily understand yung literary piece na binabasa mo is to answer some guide questions. Now, kung walang guide questions yung literary piece na binabasa mo, you could make for your own. Pwede kang mag-create or magsulat ng sarili mong mga questions, and as you read that one, as you proceed from chapter to chapter, you answer those questions. And then next is find connections in the details with your predictions. So you connect the ideas, you relate the ideas, you relate the events that transpired in the story. And then finally, you write a conclusion. So those are the steps that should be undertaken when you are inferring meaning or predicting meaning from literature. And the last one is inferring meaning in multiple choice exam. Say for example, magte-take ka ng examination, hindi ka nag-review. So it doesn't mean na kapag hindi ka na nag-review ay mazi-zero ka na or hindi ka nag-attend ng class, because we can infer meaning from the questions. First is identify an inference question. So if you are asked to make an inference, the most obvious questions will have the word suggest, imply, support, infer, and most likely. And then trust the passage. So use the passage to prove that the inference you selected is the correct one. Say for example, A, B, or C. Patunayan mo that the correct answer is B. Parang you argue with letter A, you argue with letter B, including C and D. Kung sino sa kanilang mananalo, that's the answer on that multiple choice examination. Next, hunt for clues. So word for word, parang you underline every word in the sentence and then you try to make connections and then maghahunt ka. Asan dito yung significant words or asan dito yung mga words na pwedeng makapagbigay sa akin ng hints or clue to the answer. And then narrow down the choices. Para when we say narrow down the choices, kung magte-test ka, gagawa ka ng tinatawag natin na elimination. Eliminate mo, when we say eliminate, tanggalin. You remove those choices that we call ridiculous choices. So when we say ridiculous choices, those choices that are make-believe or hindi kapani-paniwalang mga choices, tanggalin mo na. Tanggalin mo na si A kung hindi naman siya wala naman siyang relevance doon sa question. Tanggalin mo na si D. Ngayon, di B and C na lang ang pagpipilian mo. That's what we call narrowing down the choices. Papakuntiin mo yung pagpipilian mo in order for you to get to the accurate or correct answer. And then practice. After knowing the steps of making inference, you need to practice making your own inference. Of course, make sure naman that your inferences are having sense or may mga meaning naman yung mga inference na sinasabi ninyo. When we say may sense, yung mga inference na nakasupport talaga doon sa existing evidence. So, that is all about identifying clues and inferring meaning from spoken and written text. So, if you have questions, feel free to drop them in our group chat. And of course, if there are words or ideas na hindi nyo naintindihan, just drop them in our group chat. Again, summarize this one, indicate your name in your notebook so it will be easier for me to check your summary. Thank you, and please do not share the link. This is for educational purposes only. Thank you and good day everyone.